Welcome to the Riverside Project podcast. We are mobilizing Houston to empower families and transform generations. We hope these conversations will give you a greater understanding of the issues facing our community and inspire you to find your place along the river. Hi, everyone. I'd like to introduce Jennifer Clifford. She is joining us on the podcast today. Jennifer is a native Houstonian. She's a former foster parent turned adoptive and biological mom. She's also a project manager by trade, but now she stays home full-time, helping to run their family businesses, raising their children, and homeschooling their children as well. She also serves in various ministries that support foster care. So, Jennifer, we're glad to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, let's start off. Tell us a little bit about who you are. Tell us a little bit about your family, your ministry.
Yep. So my husband, Ryan, and I have been married for almost 13 years. We have 4 children. Our oldest 3, we have a daughter who's 13, and 2 sons that are 7 and 6. The 3 of them, they are biological siblings, and they were adopted from foster care. And then we have what we call our surprise baby. Our youngest, he's almost 3, and he was born in the midst of our foster and adoptive journey. So
super fun.
Yeah.
Not your conventional becoming a mom scenario, right? Both stepping into foster care, considering adoption, and then biological baby that pops in right in the middle.
Yes.
We usually do this at the end of the podcast, but I want to start off with it. What is your why? Why did you originally step into a foster care journey? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So when my husband and I were dating, one of the things that we had talked about that we both felt very passionate about was adoption. We both wanted to adopt and wanted that to be a part of our story and growing our family. We obviously did not have any idea what that really looks like.
No one ever does, really.
No. So after many years of infertility, in 2017, we sought out help from a fertility specialist.
Okay.
After many rounds of fertility treatments, nothing was successful. And so we really had to sit down and look at each other and say, it's not working. What are the next steps? And before we had sought out fertility treatments, we had actually attended a foster care informational session through an agency.
Okay.
My husband went reluctantly when I told him that, we had talked about adoption, and that's something that we really wanted to both do. Foster care was not his idea of that.
Scary.
Yes, very scary.
We hear the same things a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he will absolutely tell everybody that, I don't want to sign up. I didn't want to sign up for that heartache.
Yeah.
Children are placed in your home, you care for them, you love them, and then they're taken away from you. And I think that's a lot of the mentality that people have about foster care. And so we went to that informational session, and they gave us a lot of different statistics about kids in care, how many are reunified, how many go to family members. And that really changed my husband's mindset. Yeah. And so at the end of our infertility journey, we came to the conclusion that we felt like God was closing one door and opening another door for us to start looking at foster care.
Okay. What changed it for your husband? Just the data? Was it kind of the data that was helpful to wrap his mind around it? Or was there anything in particular that really kind of shifted for him?
I think it was a lot of the data, especially around how many siblings are in the foster care system. And that's one of the things that we really felt was important in our journey as we were getting licensed, and as we talked about what types of placements we would be willing to accept. Sibling groups were always a part of that equation.
Okay. Yeah. It's interesting, as you step in, you just don't really know what you're doing. You don't know what you're looking for. You're just gaining information. But it's interesting to know that as you're stepping into it, you just knew siblings are going to be a part of this. Right. And that's kind of what we're just going to say yes to. Yeah. So describe for us a little bit. We get questions around what is the licensing process? What does that even look like? Can you share a little bit about what that journey was like for you through just getting licensed and starting to take placements?
Yeah. So we, in January of 2018, submitted our initial paperwork and application through an agency to become licensed foster parents. We attended training classes in February.
Okay.
We did our home study in March. We
Doing it
were
quickly.
licensed in April, and we had our first placement by May.
Wow.
So for us, the process moved very quickly, but we were very motivated to move through the process because we felt like this was the door that God was really opening for us and pushing us through.
Yeah.
And so the licensing process, it was fairly straightforward. There's lots of paperwork, lots of keeping up with paperwork and what you've submitted and what you haven't submitted. And we had a lot of the agency would contact and say, oh, we need this again, or we need this again. And so it's just a lot of moving parts that you have to keep track of. And so being organized and staying organized was really important for us. But I think also you kind of move through the process as fast as you want to. And because we were motivated, we were of the mindset that we weren't going to be the ones that were waiting.
Yeah.
They were waiting on us for submittal of paperwork or anything. So when they asked for something, we immediately took care of it and did it. And so I think that's why we moved through the process so quickly.
Yeah. I could imagine taking that step and moving forward while also still probably experiencing some grief over infertility. How did you, and it's probably more personal, so feel free to just say I don't want to answer it. But can you speak a little bit to just how you grieved and also anticipated at the same time? I know a lot of families that we interact with come to us saying we've been struggling with infertility and now we're considering foster care. Is there anything that you would say about your journey that was helpful?
Yeah, there was some grief that I did experience. We didn't experience the grief of a loss of pregnancy. So miscarriage was never something that we experienced. We were just never able to conceive.
Yeah.
And so there was a grieving process that I had to kind of come to. And it's like, I'm a woman and, I want to be a mom and I want to be able to conceive and carry a child. And I think because we were it was very clear to us that that door closed and this door was blown wide open and we were moving through the process so quickly. It kind of took our mind off of that grief process, I guess.
Yeah, it's not so much, I don't know that there's ever a situation where you're like, okay, now grief is done.
Yes.
And now we're moving forward. Like it's just not that straightforward. So I'm sure it's a blend of the two and it comes up in different ways for sure. Well, tell us a little bit about placement. So you're going through the process, door finally opens for taking a kid in. What did that journey look like for you?
So we went through, our agency was really good about talking with us about the parameters in which we would be open to.
Okay. And
so we decided early on that sibling groups were absolutely something we wanted to be open to. Gender was not a factor. And age, we ended up deciding early on that 0 to 7 years was going to be our age range. And later on, we did change that, which then paved the path for other things to happen and other children to be placed with us. So it was just a matter of we kind of had to sit down and say, like, what are we capable of doing and what are we equipped to handle? And even beyond that is like, what does our support system look like? And what are the things that we could handle utilizing that support system?
Yeah, knowing nothing about the process or having never done it before, really, I'm having to make those decisions on like, I think that we're capable for this, but
we don't know.
You're not really sure.
Know,
you're just thinking, never being a parent yet.
And even then, you're still, I think during training classes, they try and prepare you for all the things, but you're really drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah.
And
there's so much information.
There really is. And it's not until you're in the midst of the placement that you're like, oh yeah, they did talk about this in training. I think I need to go back and refresh my memory on, what we're experiencing here or what this is. And so there is a lot of that.
We see that a lot with the trauma training that you go through, right? I remember going through, you see Karen Purvis up on the screen and she's telling you all these things in her really lovely and warm voice. And you're like, this is all really good, but you have no context for it. There's no child in your home. And then when a child is placed and you start seeing some of these behaviors or things, you're like, oh yeah, I think we learned some of that. But now you have context for the information that you were just trying to.
That's right.
Yeah. So what was the first placement like? I'm sure your world just turned upside down.
It sure did.
Yeah. How did that happen? What happened there?
So we got the call for our first placement in the afternoon on a weekday.
Okay.
And it was an emergency placement of a 4-year-old little girl and a 2-year-old little boy. And we quickly realized we had no idea what we were doing. Parenting nor foster parenting. But we were very blessed. Even before we became licensed, I was invited to a local foster and adoptive support group that was very, very rich, very deep in knowledge. There were lots of ladies that had walked this journey, and it was very, very helpful that we were already plugged in and we were already connected. We knew all of the local resources, where the closets were, where to go for what questions to ask, what to be a part of. And so that first placement, it was definitely eye-opening because we went into the placement thinking, foster care was our means to grow our family.
Sure.
And we very, very quickly realized that was absolutely the wrong way in thinking. And it really made us think, it changed our mindset to really, it's giving your family to a child, not getting a child for your family, but giving your family to a child for as long as they need. And so there were a lot of ups and downs during that first placement. The kids were very blessed to have a lot of family members that were coming forward. Some of them backed out in the end, but the caseworker was still very adamant that we were the permanent placement for these children. And I think we held on to that a little bit tighter than we probably should have. Because as we were, as we were coming to one of their permanency hearings, they had actually placed these children as a legal risk placement in our home. And so legal risk is basically more than likely parental rights will be terminated, and they are looking for an adoptive placement for these children. And so going into the next week's court date, we were very, very sure that these children were not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And in the end, we went to court, and it was a very interesting day because the judge actually was not hearing any cases in the public forum of the courtroom, which typically happens, is actually hearing all of the cases in chambers. And so because we weren't a party to the case, we didn't get to go back there and hear what was going on. And so, and so a family member did end up intervening, and the caseworker was very sure that it was not even an option. But I remember we were the very last court case of the day. So we had been there all day, and Ryan had left to go to the bathroom. And so I was sitting in the courtroom literally by myself. And that the kid's child advocate walks out of the back room, and I could just see on her face that something was not right. And the first word she said to me was like, "I'm sorry." And then she proceeded to tell me that the judge has said that the kids need to be placed with this family member by the end of the week.
Okay. Grief upon grief.
It's very heartbreaking, because you go into something like that with a set expectation, and then something else happens that is not.
You realize you don't have as much control.
Not at all. And I think that is absolutely one thing we learned with our first placement, is that there is, You just have to learn to kind of navigate things as they come. And what one person says is very well not what is going to happen.
And sometimes it's well-meaning. It's
Absolutely.
based on the information that they have.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were no significant concerns with this this family member, like no safety concerns or anything like that. We were when we went home after court, it was very difficult because we were packing all their things. They had been with us for almost 6 months, packing all their things and saying goodbyes and explaining to them where they were going. Thankfully, they had had a relationship with this family member.
Okay.
And so they knew where they were going. They knew where they were going to be living.
Okay.
And so there was a lot of comfort in that. And so I made sure when we were packing their things that we were including all of their favorite things. We sent tons of pictures with them of all the things that we had done, gone to the beach, the zoo, visits. I also wrote a very, very long and detailed letter to their family member about all the things because they hadn't been living with her. And so all of the routines, all of the things that they were used to, the foods that they liked, potty training things that we were doing. And so I wanted to make sure that she was fully prepared and fully equipped to kind of just jump in where we were leaving off.
Yeah.
So.
I assume, what were you thinking in that process? You kind of shared on the logistical side, but what were you and your husband just processing in that? Was it even a question of like, I don't know if we want to do this anymore? Or were you ready for the next placement? How were you feeling?
Gosh, I don't think I really understood the grief that we would experience on all different levels becoming foster parents, because it's not just this one particular moment we were grieving. You grieve in all sorts of ways. When the kids were first placed with us, they were very attached with their birth parents. And there were nights when our foster daughter would cry for hours and hours for her mommy. There was grief there. There was grief for her, for the loss she was experiencing. And then there was the other side of it. You had to think about their birth parents and what the grief that they were experiencing. Just because they were making poor decisions doesn't mean they didn't care and love their children. And so now coming into this loss that we were experiencing, it was really difficult. Not just for us, but we signed up for this. Our family was very committed and very supportive of us our entire journey. Yeah. And they cared and loved for these kids like they had always been a part of our family. And I think that was probably one of the most difficult things to process through. Yeah. It's because we willingly walked into this knowing what we were getting into. We kind of just dragged them along, and they were experiencing the grief of losing them too and having to say goodbye. So that was really difficult. Coming out of that after they left, we really did have to have a lot of really hard conversations to say, like, is this for us? And I think coming out of that placement, realizing that we had gone in with very misaligned expectations and that we wanted to grow our family in this, that really wasn't what it should have been.
You start to see more, you see it from other people's perspectives.
That's right. So. Yes. Yeah. And so we sat down and we talked about it, and we were very sure that we wanted to continue on our fostering journey, whatever that ended up looking like.
Your hands are more open at this point, maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
One of the things that we talk about in church leader trainings with the congregations that we train to step into this space, Jason Johnson talks about how there's kind of those surface fears that people say when they're considering becoming foster parents, and then there's that kind of root fear that we're really talking about but not talking about. And sometimes with regard to grief, what we hear all the time is, I don't think I can, I don't want to risk losing these kids. I don't think I can do that because the kids might get taken away. I'm afraid I'm going to get too attached. And that's kind of where we hang out in terms of that question. But really what people are saying is, I don't know if I have what it takes to grieve like that.
Right.
And that's a totally different question. It's related, but it's a deeper question that we have to walk through because we're all going to go through grief at different times in our lives. But would we sign up for that type of grief? And would we allow ourselves to feel those things in all those directions that you talked about and allow the Lord to move us through that and grow us in that way? That's a scary thing to say
really
yes to. But that's what we talk about when we say yes to stepping into this. It's saying yes to a kid. It's also saying yes to potential grief and heartache that He is going to be faithful to pull us through.
Yeah.
That's so much. It's so hard.
It is. And I think, I think that there is like extreme joy you experience in foster parenting. But then there's the other side of it that's like extreme heartache. But you get both of those things, There's blessing and there's joy to be found in seeing these kids grow and thrive. But then there's the heartache side of it that of all of the various things that you are broken over.
Yeah. It's the things that matter are hard situation. It's the hardest things, but they really do matter at the root. Well, what happened after that? Tell me a little bit about, you decided to step back in. Where did the journey go after that?
So a couple weeks after our first placement left, we got a call for another sibling group.
Okay.
2 kids. They were with us for less than a week.
Okay.
And then they were placed with an aunt and an uncle out of town. A couple weeks after that, we got another call for 3 girls under the age of 3.
Wow.
So that was
throwing
very
you into
fun.
the deep end.
Yes. And that was a whole journey and experience. They were with us through Thanksgiving and Christmas. So it was a very sweet time for us and them and our family, getting to experience holidays with them. And then they were placed with a great grandparent in February.
Okay.
And then a couple weeks after that,
revolving door.
Yes, we got the call for our boys.
Okay.
So that's where that journey started.
Okay. Tell me about that.
Okay. So we were told by our agency very clearly that they would never call us on weekends, nor would they call us late at night.
Okay.
So here we are on a Sunday night, probably 8 or 9 o'clock at night. We are just enjoying a nice glass of wine and a cheese plate, and my phone rings and it's our agency. And they ask if we would be open to an emergency placement of 2 toddler boys, a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old. And so we immediately said yes, and we jumped into action. Now, we had just had a placement of girls, so we only had girl things. And the boys did play with those girl things for a couple weeks before we transitioned to all boy things. But we did, we every placement that we had, we kind of we always had a plan. One of us would ready the house while the other one of us would go out and get last minute things. And so when you get that call, you're getting the call from your agency, and then they're like, "Hey, just wait. You'll get a call from the caseworker." And then that's when you ask all the questions you can. And sometimes the answers you get for those questions are not the correct things. So our process would be, we'd get the call from the caseworker. We'd make a list of, are they in diapers? Are they potty training? Do you know what they like to eat? What clothing sizes are they in? All of those different types of things. And then one of us would run to the store and buy really arranged, like we would do like 4 different sizes of clothes just to get us through the next couple of days. Because I always knew the next day or even that night, I could reach out to one of our local closets and say, we just got a placement. Yeah. Here are the ages, here are the sizes, and here's the things that we need. And the people that run those closets would go and collect all of the things. And we could always go within the next few days and pick up what we needed, which was very, very helpful. And so, we got the call for the boys, and that's, where that journey started.
Yeah. I mean, what were the placements like after that? So at this point, is the mindset totally different? Are you thinking they're probably going to leave, they're probably going to leave, they're probably going to leave? Or are you able to kind of how are you balancing that after going through reunification multiple times or family member multiple times? What was your mindset at that point?
Our mindset definitely was, we're going to care for these kids for however long they're with us.
Okay.
Very early on, there with the boys, we found out that there were grandparents that were pretty close to where we live that were very interested in taking placement. And so we actually had an opportunity to meet them at a parent visitation where the parents didn't show, but the grandparents did.
Okay.
And so our child advocate called us and asked us if we would be okay meeting at the park. And it was around Easter. And so if we could do an Easter egg hunt with their grandparents and the boys.
Okay.
And a couple of days after that, I got a call from the caseworker saying that the grandparents did not feel like they wanted to move forward with taking placement, that they felt the best place for these boys was with us.
Okay.
And so that was hard to kind of balance because there was this, we're going to care for these boys for as long as they're going to be here. But then also at the same time, you're getting all these things fed to you from caseworkers and family members and all of this saying, like, oh, they're going to stay with you guys and the way the case direction is going. But really, it is like, it's not final until it's actually final.
Right.
That is what we have learned.
That's so much uncertainty. You're trying to plan for the future. You're trying to wrap your mind around, your heart around what this could look like. And you always kind of have to have that open hand.
Yes.
It's just not easy.
No, it's really not. So
what happened after that? How did it move forward?
So very shortly after we were placed with the boys, we found out that there were multiple siblings.
Okay.
And a couple of them had already years before been adopted through foster care. They had a younger sister who was with a paternal grandmother. And then they had an older sister we found out about. At the time, she was with her great-grandparents. But she had also lived with her grandparents. She had lived with her birth mom for a time with the boys. She had lived with a maternal grandmother. And so there was a lot of movement for her in her life. And so we had an opportunity to have a sibling visit and a grandparent visit at the park near our house with the boys and with her and met her for the first time. And she was 9 at the time. Very sweet, very sassy. And I will never forget, it was just her and I, and we were watching the boys play on the playground. And she asked me, can I call you Mom? And I said, well,
that's complicated.
I said, well, here are some other options. You can call me whatever you feel comfortable calling me, but here's some other options for you too. And, Miss Jenny is what the boys called me and when they were first placed with us. And she's just thought about it for a few minutes. She's like, no, I think I'm going to call you Mom because that's what my brothers call you. And that was really very hard to process because it's really what she wanted. She wanted a mom. She wanted a dad. She wanted to be in a family. And so walking away from that, it was really difficult to be like, oh gosh, we're walking away from this. What does this look like for her? And I didn't want to fill her with any, misguided hope or what, because we were very early on in the boys' case. We had no idea where it was going. And so we didn't want to fill her with anything that, could potentially, cause her heartache too. And so we maintained a relationship with her. She moved from her great-grandparents to her grandparents' house to be closer to the boys so we could have more often visits. We found out that she did have some dental needs that needed to be taken care of, and they were pretty serious. She didn't have insurance at the time, so we contacted the boys' caseworker and asked if there would be any issue with us taking her somewhere just to get her assessed and potentially like paying for what she needed, because some of the things that she was experiencing, there was just very painful stuff. And so we did that over the summer. And
was she in foster care at this point?
She was not in foster care at this point. And so in August, we got a frantic phone call from her grandparents saying that somebody had contacted a CPS and they were opening an investigation on them. We had never had really any concerns of anybody caring for her. It just wasn't a thought in our mind. So this kind of came out of left field, but it opened the door for her to come into the system and her to eventually be placed with us. And so as they're navigating this investigation journey, they were very committed in the beginning to caring for sister and parenting her. And we told them we would come alongside them with whatever they needed. We would, they come see the boys whenever they wanted. And so the grandparents had called us and we ended up having the boy's sister over for the weekend. Her grandparents were going out of town for a job and we cleared it with the caseworker, cleared it with the investigator. They said it was fine. So she joined us for the weekend. And we took her back on Sunday evening. And later on that week, I get a call from her grandparents asking if I can come meet them. So I went to go meet them and they said she came back, had a great weekend, but was moping around all week and they couldn't get it out of her what was going on. So finally, near the end of the week, she told them she didn't want to hurt their feelings, but she really wanted to live with her brothers and with us. And so I had a couple conversations with various family members specifically about her. But again, I reminded them that, we were licensed and we had a license to uphold and we couldn't just take her. And so the best course of action for them was to contact the investigator and let her know what their wishes were. I was very shocked when I was on my way home, about 30 minutes later when I got a call from the investigator and they said, would it be okay if we placed her with you guys tonight?
Oh, wow.
Yes. So it happened very quickly. I was thinking, 1 week, 2 weeks, something like that. No, it was, we're going to go ahead and make the move tonight. So that's how she joined our family.
Okay. And then what happened?
And then a few weeks later, I had been battling a terrible stomach virus. And for some reason, I just couldn't shake it. And the thought never crossed my mind that pregnancy was part of that. But I ended up taking a pregnancy test and it was positive. And so in the midst of fostering our 3 children, we found out we were pregnant for the very first time. And so,
after years of infertility.
Yes, after years of infertility.
What was the timing there? So how long did that happen after she came to your home?
So the boys had been with us for about 6 months.
Okay.
Then she joined our family. And then about 5 weeks later, we found out we were pregnant.
Okay. And how did you
it was a shock. It was a shock. It was very unexpected. And I had really, once we kind of knew where the direction, at this point, we knew where the direction of all of their cases were going. And I had gone through my own grieving process of not like, okay, I think I'm okay with 3 children. It's more than enough. I think I'm okay with not ever being pregnant. I think I'm okay with that. And it was, I think I grieved that. And then here we are, surprise, pregnant. It's like, okay, this is how it's going to go. So in the midst of all of that, we fast forward to February and the boys' case goes to final trial and parental rights are terminated. And then their sister's case, she had a permanency hearing in March. And going into that, her ad litem had contacted me and said that because of the decision made at the boys' trial, that they were going to be pushing for final trial to be moved up for her. And so we went to court. They asked us to testify. The judge asked us, what were our intentions? Did we want to adopt all three? And we said, absolutely, 100% yes. And the judge made the decision that day that they were going to pick the very earliest date they could to do final trial. And that was April 1st. And we left court very excited, and we went on an awesome spring break vacation, camping in Arkansas. And then we came back and everything was shut down because of COVID.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Throw that into the
Yes. So this was in 2020. In the midst of all of this, we were thinking, there's no way they're going to have final trial. This is just going to be a mess. And thankfully, they, in Montgomery County, her case was one of the first cases that they did final trial over Zoom.
Okay.
So they did go through with final trial, and they did terminate parental rights, which then paved the path for her to be adopted with her brothers, which is what we wanted. And so we ended up having delivering our youngest July 19th. And then when we were in the hospital, we got an email from our adoption attorney with dates for adoption. And we ended up adopting our three oldest on July 31st.
Same month.
Just within a few days.
Adopted three, gave birth to one.
Yes.
All in 1 month.
Yes.
Okay. And that's where we are now.
That is where we are now.
Okay.
Yep.
That's awesome. Gosh, there's so many questions that I could sit here forever to ask you. But I think I want to end with just this last one. We often get a lot of interest emails from people saying, hey, we're considering becoming foster parents. We're not sure. We don't want to step into an agency because they kind of rope you in a little bit, and they want you to start the process as soon as possible. And if you're just exploring, they just don't know. And so I'll usually grab coffee or, have a phone call with somebody, send them a perspective resource guide, try to answer their questions and kind of move them through the process. What would you say if you were sitting down to coffee with somebody who was just at that very beginning, maybe where you were, maybe experiencing infertility, maybe not, but just at that very beginning spot? What would you say they should be either thinking through, or what would you say to prepare for?
I think the greatest blessing for us in our journey is that we got plugged into a support group very early on in the licensing process.
Yeah.
And so that was very helpful to talk to other people and even witness what other people were experiencing and what they were going through, and ask all the questions and, have all the conversations and build relationships as we were moving through the licensing process. So I think finding a local support group, understanding where even your local resources are that you can get the initial information from, it's very, very helpful.
Yeah. That relationships.
Yeah.
Building relationships with people who've gone before.
Absolutely. Yeah. And your agency, choosing your agency is a big decision. And being a part of that support group allowed us to ask questions about different agencies and what people didn't like and what they did like, and what was their worst experience with their agency and what was their best experience with their agency, and processes. And because yes, they all have to follow the same licensing standards and all of that, but not all of them operate the same. Not all of them have the same rules that they follow. Some agencies are a lot more stringent on the placements they'll place with families. Some agencies are like, you want to take 6 kids? Here you go, So you have to really, the agency's interviewing you. You have to do just as much interviewing of the agency, because you want to make sure it's a good match, because they are there to advocate for you as a foster family too. And you need that. You need a good partnership with your agency.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for spending some time with us. Thank you for just the journey that you have been on, for continuing on, for processing all of that, and just being open to it. I think it's really easy to step into those hard moments where it just gets a little bit almost unbearable, and then to just take another step and trust that there's something better coming. It's been truly a privilege to see and to hear about. I know we were connected on those early days, and you're like, how do I manage this? And it was just one step in front of the other. So I'm grateful for you. Thank you for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
To those listening, we hope these conversations have inspired you to find your place along the river. And we welcome you to join us in bringing hope and renewal to the city of Houston. If you'd like more information on how to get involved, please visit riversideproject.org and submit a contact form. We'll see you next time.